Hi, friends. Welcome to episode 325 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast or on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United and the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Hopefully, many of you tuning in have already started your summer vacation and are taking a well-earned break from school and our school routines. That being said, the podcast will continue to broadcast throughout the summer months, and that is made entirely possible through the generosity of school librarians who take time out of their busy summer schedule to record an episode. I know quite a few of you tuning in right now who have given a presentation at a district meeting or a state-level conference this past school year. Why not recycle your presentation and extend the learning opportunity to a national and even an international audience? I encourage you to take a look at the FAQs in the show notes of every podcast episode. Email me at schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com and share your presentation with me. I am happy to answer any questions you have, and with your permission, I'll create a draft outline to share with you before we schedule a 90-minute meeting when it best fits your schedule to record. It's that simple. Get a head start on next year's evaluation and your evidence of leadership in your profession requirement, and record a podcast episode. Friends, it is now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor to this podcast, Junior Library Guild. What if I told you that there's a collection development service that can save you time and increase title circulation rates? Well, Junior Library Guild does that and more. With their team of experienced media library specialists and publishing industry professionals, every title they recommend is vetted for my readers and organized into categories based on reading level and interest. Ultimately, Junior Library Guild helps my students foster a love of reading. Use code UNITED15 to receive 15 free books in your first shipment. And now for today's episode, Committee Leadership and my conversation with Molly Dettmann. Friends, I'm so excited. Molly Dettmann, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me back.
You know, it has been a minute. When I have to go back and scroll to figure out when we last spoke on the show, you and I first met in 2022. We recorded an episode 174, Teacher of the Year. And I'm pretty sure the only reason why I knew to interview you is because I think I saw you share it on social media.
Yeah. Back in 2022, I was named Teacher of the Year at my school, and I was very proud of that. So it was really nice to share it and get lots of one school library wins it, we all win it kind of support from the school library community, and then was excited to talk to you about it a little more.
Well, and, I want to go into a little more depth, but let's go ahead. First of all, introduce yourself. Tell us about the library you work in, the grades you serve, and what does a day look like for you? What's your schedule like?
Yeah, so I work at Norman North High School in Norman, Oklahoma. We are a 9 through 12 high school. We have about 2,400 students. We're one of two main high schools in my district. And a typical day, there's no typical day. Anything could happen. I do a lot. I work with a co-librarian, and we do a lot of teaching. So, a typical day might be we're both teaching different units or with different classes. We have 9th grade lunch duty, which is always a joy. We might have something like meetings after school, just all sorts of things going on. Fun things too, might be a dress-up day, might have an assembly, might have a rally through the school for a state championship. So high school, we really celebrate those big successes, so that sometimes we get to do some fun things like that in between the school part.
Awesome. A quick question. For lunch duty, does that mean students coming into your library for lunch, or you have to go down to the cafeteria?
So we're really fortunate. Our lunch duty is the library. So we are open we have 2 different lunches, 9th grade and then upper class lunch, and we're open for both. So we just make sure the area is supervised. Students can't eat in the library because it just gets really messy, but they can hang out, play board games, chill within usually we just walk around, just kind of talk to students and just get to know them, and then also let them just chill and be themselves in our space.
Excellent. Excellent. So, quick question. How many years had you been working at Norman North? Is that right? How many years were you there before you became Teacher of the Year?
So I was in my 4th year of teaching there. They do the voting and all of that around October. So really technically I just finished my 3rd year in a couple months, but you have to be within your 4th year to be eligible, and it just happened.
That's amazing. Well, and good for them for recognizing that, I think, and I've come from a background I've been in a couple different districts. It is, I'll be honest, I've worked in buildings where you have to work at a minimum of 5 years before you can even be considered. There's sort of I don't want to say a hierarchy, but there are certain people who would sort of are lined up to get Teacher of the Year at some point. And it's just a matter of their turn, and that sounds terrible, right?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I think you have to at least be out of your temporary contract is kind of where ours comes from. And in the years I've been at my school, we've had people within their first 4 years get it, and then some that have taught there for a long time and that kind of gotten their celebration. So it's been really cool, I think, within my district. But then it is a process. After that, you're doing interviews and getting filmed and doing all this stuff. So I think also for some people, if you don't want to do all of that, you're not going to put yourself out there, even if you are really technically the Teacher of the Year at your school.
Well, and I'm thinking that for a couple of years, the Teacher of the Year was somebody who was going to be retiring. And this was kind of one little nod of appreciation that we're going to give this to you this year because we know you're on your way out. And we just want to make sure we appreciate all the years of dedication. So it sounds like it could be a very different process depending on your school. You and I met in person in Tampa during AASL's annual conference in 2023. That was the first time we had met in person, wasn't it?
It was, even though I had met you in my heart before that.
You do a certain amount. I know we are friends who text. And so I think once you do an episode, it does sort of open that floodgate and that invitation to really call upon each other as, our virtual PLN, as it were. I think that was something that definitely happened right after we had our episode. But let me ask you, when you were at AASL in Tampa, you had quite a sort of, I don't know, that ceremony. We all went, it was early in the morning, and this was where they were going to be giving out awards. And I can't be the only person who noticed this, but you were dancing across the stage. I only noticed this because you wore this bright floral, dress. You were so perky. And you were dancing across the stage multiple times. And it really was fantastic. You had an amazing morning, being recognized for all your hard work. But would you give us an idea of some of the things that you are recognized for? Because I think, quite honestly, these are some things that not everybody tuning in might be aware is out there.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate to win a couple of awards that not only helped my school, but also got me to the funds to go to ASL. One was the Francis Henne Award, which was for school librarians within their first 5 years of school librarianship. And that one I really got from my committee and state involvement. because part of it's like your potential as a future leader. And it was like, well, you already put in a lot of work at your state. So yeah, of course, let's get you to the national level to meet and benefit from that kind of exposure. So that was one big award that gave me money to go to ASL. And then another really cool one they started was this Toor scholarship for strong public school libraries. So if you're a public school librarian, you can apply for this. And really the big thing you're putting in your application is some sort of like advocacy campaign or some sort of something that you did to really promote your public school library. So mine was my social media for my library and how I used it to promote what I do as a school librarian and what my school library does for the school. But other people want it for other cool like programs and events and things they did within their community. And then I got an Inspire Collection Development Grant, which was a really awesome one where I got some funds to purchase books to replace those lost ones that never came back after March 2020.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and friends, I'll include a link to all of these in the show notes. One of the things that is required is a certain amount of active, engagement on your part, Molly, because when it comes to receiving the Francis Henne Award, that goes back to committee work that you did largely at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got a scholarship and you've got a grant. Again, things that require a certain amount of work on your end to make sure that you're going to even be considered for these opportunities. This year, you became a School Library Journal mover and shaker along with fellow Oklahoma colleagues Amanda Kordelsky and Charity Pennington. And I've included a link in today's show notes, but could you give listeners an idea of the advocacy work that the three of you were doing when you were given this important recognition?
Yeah, so I love my friends Amanda and Charity. I learned everything about school librarianship from them. They're the ones who talked me into it from public librarianship, but they also are amazing advocates for school libraries within our state and have been for several years. Some of the big highlights, though, Charity served as our State Library Association president during some of the worst censorship bills on deck during that whole time. And then Amanda was the advocacy committee chair, but that's just a little bit like that's just kind of the big start of their advocacy work. And then I, at the same time, served as our chair for our Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Intellectual Freedom Roundtable. Lots to that name. But we were doing a lot of great work, just kind of supporting school libraries and libraries across the state dealing with censorship issues and just trying to work with making sure that any adverse legislation wasn't going to come to fruition, come to really, really negatively affect the work we do on a day-to-day basis. So, they've continued to do that. Charity's going to be our advocacy chair actually in a couple weeks. And then Amanda's going to serve as our AASL president incoming. So they continued their leadership in terms of advocating nationally for school libraries. And then I've continued to really push for civic engagement education within my school, doing voter registration drives, sharing how to do that, so other school libraries can also start from the ground up, get those students civically engaged, understanding the importance of libraries and how to support them after they're done with school.
And I remember, this was a presidential election year in 2024, and you had this amazing upswelling of excitement and activity in your library. And I have to imagine that the civic engagement piece where you're encouraging your students really does carry them through to adulthood, because as now eligible for voting, and this being a presidential election, this was last year, that had to have had a lasting impression on the students you serve.
Yes. I think what was cool that I tried to get them involved with it. So I had our senior class officers and our student council leaders, invited them to work with our League of Women Voter volunteers. So they got to work with these very experienced women who have been doing this for a long time and then get involved themselves and get their peers involved. And so it was very low key on my part. I just had to set up some tables with some decorations, but really getting to see that connection and see them see the importance of it and really get, I mean, of course, it's always cooler when the kids tell each other to do something versus adults. So that was really fun. And we even like really opened it up to make sure teachers could register, but any adult in the building that day. And my favorite part was in the one we did in the fall, one of our substitute teachers, she had just become a citizen. And so she was already looking to register, and she happened to like knew this was coming up and picked that day. And no lie, I was like crying at my desk, like, this is beautiful. This is America.
You know, all of us can think of a time when the students have really taken the reins and taken charge of the situation. And your job really is just to make sure that they have what they need as the adult in the room, to make sure that when they want to do something, that they have the tools and can move forward with their plans. I know that that's really exciting. I was asked during the last week of school if I would be the sponsor of a banned book club in my school. And this was not because I had tagged a few favorite students. Absolutely not. They just random came up to me and said, hey, we were wondering. I was like, oh my God, yes, the answer. So absolutely. But it is so much easier when these ideas come from a space in our young people that it's something that they decide to do. And you're just like, I'm going to make sure that we move this along and make sure that we get all of the support we can from our administrators and move forward. It is not unusual when I talk to school librarians for them to talk about how alone they are and how isolated they are. I feel like I'm an island. And that was, very much, I felt like my experience when I was first a librarian. But the wonderful thing is that you are surrounded by these amazing library leaders in your school and in your district. You've got Amanda and Charity. I have to imagine when it comes to doing things, when it comes to committee work and when it comes to tackling large projects, the fact that you have this amazing immediate source of support right there in your school and in your district. I mean, you've got the incoming president of AASL, who is your director of your school district's librarians. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So that's really fortunate. And then Charity is the director and a middle school librarian in her district. So it's cool to then have that district to district connection and just that strength within our state school librarians.
Well, and also, and forgive me, but role modeling. I mean, I can do it, so can you. I think that's always been very helpful. When I've seen somebody else do the job, I'm more likely to take on responsibility like that. Talking about today's conversation, the topic of committee leadership, it requires being involved on committees. And I would like to explore this idea a little bit with you because you are clearly not somebody who shies away from opportunities when it comes to working on committees with other educators, other school librarians. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that because you were from the very beginning of your library career, your career as a school librarian, you had opportunities to work on committees and invitations to work with other school librarians on committees. But I have to imagine that really sort of helped give you some confidence to then work as a leader or chair a committee.
Yeah. And I mean, really, it all started with our state library organization. So something that wasn't like big and scary nationally with like people from all over and not understanding maybe the full time commitment of it. State organization is where I really got my feet wet. I actually started with our state book award committee, mostly because it was like, I'm just starting in teen librarianship. I want to read books. I want to be a part of something that I used to vote on when I was a kid in Oklahoma. And that's actually, it was so funny. Like it was literally almost like, I think 10 years ago this year is when I met Charity and our intermediate Sequoia committee when we were on that work together. And book award committee work is a ton of work. But once I kind of got through that and was chair of that committee, that's when I really saw like, oh, I can do this work. I can help lead it, or maybe I just want to be a part of it. And I joined some other committees within our state organization. As soon as I was a school librarian, I became a part of our school library division. Amanda actually was my co-librarian at the time and the chair, and she was like, hey, why don't you chair awards? And I was like, okay. I even remember saying at one point, I don't think I can do this anymore. This is a lot of work as I was getting through like my first year of teaching. And then I chilled out. That was kind of 1 month where everything was a little overwhelming, but then I had my support system and it was fine. And we gave out awards and did our job.
And you just mentioned this was your first year as a school librarian. I'm going to say right now, there are a lot of people listening who during their first year of anything are going to be like, oh no, we're in survival mode right now. I'm not taking on any new responsibilities. So I can imagine that you were feeling rather tapped in terms of what was being expected of you. And yet this also was really career defining when it came to the ability that you have to really push yourself and lead at the committee level.
I mean, if I hadn't been pushed to do that, I don't think I'd be where I am right now, for sure. I mean, because I've gone on to be the chair of our school library division, and I've gotten really awesome opportunities to go to workshops and be a part of work with people from all over the country. And it's been really amazing and awesome, but you do have to have kind of push through that discomfort just a little bit to get to that point. And I will say I was a public librarian before, so I will say my first year as a public full-time librarian in grad school, I was doing nothing but school. I was doing nothing but the bare minimum to get through the day. So we all have to start at that point. But then, get to year 2 and you're like, oh, maybe I'll do a virtual committee. Maybe I'll just get my feet wet with something chill.
Well, and a couple of things I want to mention. When I was doing a little bit of research for today's conversation, I noticed that at the very least you have written 99 times for School Library Journal. Is that correct?
Yeah. Library Journal.
It's really not even part of today's conversation, but I think what is important is that the more people see Molly Dettmann's name on things, the more likely it is that you will get tagged for something else. Don't you feel that's true?
It does help. I mean, with being a part of my state library organization, as soon as I kind of proved myself with one committee, then it became, all right, we're going to call on you whether you want to or not, because we know you can do it. And there's only so many of us who can be super active right now. But then at the national level too, it's really helped. So I've since been on at least a YALSA book award or book blogging team every year for the past 10 years. And usually it's helped because I've either been on that committee and worked with people and then reached out to, who's making those selections to be like, hey, I'm interested. This is my experience. And I'm not just they at least know my name from either, that previous work or we've worked together on something. And that does make, I think, some decision making a little easier because when those leaders are putting together those committees, at the end of the day, they want to make sure that work gets done. And if at least some people for sure that have proven themselves, you want to put them so that that work gets done. And a nice mix between, new people and new fresh faces too.
I just wrote down proven too. Okay. Yes, no, that you're proven. And this networking, it sounds like no effort is ever wasted. Anytime you serve on a committee, you put yourself out there, whether you are working at the national or the state level, people are going to start to see your name pop up as somebody who's willing to do the work.
Well, and with School Library Journal too, that actually came up because I had applied for a selector position within my library system. I mean, I didn't have enough experience. And I mean, they had other amazing candidate that they hired, but I took that in stride to instead of being like, boo-hoo, I was like, well, let me get that experience then. Let me sign up and do some book reviewing. Let me do this. And of course, now I've just kept doing it because it's really fun.
Well, and you're talking to somebody who does not write for fun because that's not something that works for me. So I'm happy for you. I really am. But when I saw that come up, you do just a little search on School Library Journal and it says 99 articles. And I'm like, are you kidding? With all that you do, you're also writing. Imagine my surprise. But I'm not surprised. When I saw the AASL announce the best digital tools for teaching and learning for 2025, and friends, again, link in the show notes. And I'm reading through it. And I'm like, oh, son of a gun. I know the chairperson. That would be Molly Dettmann.
Yeah. So my first AASL committee was actually a task force where we were looking at the statement on reading. And so that was a very short-term, really interesting work that we did that I really liked. And so I've always signed up to be on committees. And I was really excited that my first ever AASL committee was actually the best digital tools for teaching and learning. So I've done that I've been a member for 2 years, and then this past year I got to serve as chair. So that was one of the first tools that I used in my practice to just get to be a better school librarian and infuse technology in more meaningful ways. So it was really cool to be a part of that. And then this year being chair was different. It was different leading it than just getting to kind of hang out and review tools and stuff. But I've really loved that work, and it's been really, really fun.
So I have so many questions. So first of all, definitely we're going to put a link in the show notes. This is a fantastic way. Anytime school librarians curate, like anything, it doesn't matter what it is, I'm on board because I put so much faith and trust in my colleagues as professionals to do this kind of work and do it thoroughly. So I'm really fascinated. Can you give us a breakdown of sort of how was the role different when you were a committee member versus when you were the chair of that committee?
Well, so as a member, we really actually don't start our work until all the nominations come in. So it's really kind of a mad dash from February to that April, May time, reviewing and doing all of the work. You can kind of start some reviews before that when they start coming in, but just like our students, vendors also love to turn things in at midnight hour. My first year, it was pretty chill. We only had, a handful of apps and things, so it was pretty manageable. And then my second year, we had changed some of the parameters where a previously honored app could resubmit. If they were within the 3 years that they had been awarded, they did need to prove that they had done some new things, but we had a discussion as the committee in terms of, well, this is still a good app, even if it was awarded 5 years ago, this should be in consideration. Whereas before we really set that line, we were like, well, they got an award 5 years ago, so we want only new things. So once we had that, we had, oh my gosh, I think it was 65 tools to review. And we had so many meetings to discuss them. So I was just grateful I wasn't the chair that year personally, because bless our chair that year. And Allison Klein, she is the backbone of the Best Digital Tools Committee. She organizes all the Google Forms where we input our reviews, and she compiles all that so we have something to really look at and make our meetings efficient in terms of okay, we all like this app. We all reviewed it well. Any other thoughts? No, let's move on to these other ones that have some more discussion that need to happen. So I just got to be a part of that. And, I just made sure I met my deadlines and reviewed by the time I needed to review things. But as committee chair, it was a little different, being the one to set that and also just having to be human. This work is being done for free $99 an hour. So on top of just, being that experience working with others, there's lots of intrinsic fun that comes from working on these committees, but also when you don't hear from somebody, you have to follow up. And then if they're oh, life came at me, I can't be a part of this, you just have to be understanding and then, reconfigure. Or if nobody met that deadline you set, well, maybe it's on me. Maybe I didn't word it right. Maybe and also we just need to move forward and come up with a different game plan versus freaking out, which I'm not going to lie, I wanted to, but at the same time, we just have to move forward. So being the committee chair, there's a little bit more to juggle and work with and coordinate than just getting to be a part of the fun. But my committee members did an amazing job. I actually started this year, and I didn't know we didn't do this because YALSA always did it, where we list the committee members in the press release. And so I thought we did that for this, and it was oh, actually we don't, but we probably should. And so, everybody who wanted their name included, we all got to be on that press release to share that we were a part of this work.
A couple things I wanted to talk about, because I really getting this sort of behind the scenes of what it's like to chair a committee, a national committee, and forgive me, chair any committee. There's a great deal of expectation that falls squarely on your shoulders. I want to know, because it did list the other people on your committee. So I'm not calling any individuals out, but how is it that you are not intimidated by committee members who have been in an area of education for decades? You had 10 people on the committee, one who serves on a local board of education, another one who is faculty at a university, and another one who is a retired school librarian. And then here is you, and you are chairperson. And tell me how it is that you were able to sort of navigate what could have been sort of a battle of egos. It sounds like it went well, but I think that has a lot to do with how you approach people and the personalities that they bring to the kind of work that you're doing.
Well, and I think kind of the way I approached it is, and the way I've kind of with my other committees too, is we all have our own experiences and all of them are valuable. I kind of do, like, especially with my book committee work, I kind of do my little like pep talk at the beginning where it's like we're all going to we all serve certain teen groups in our communities, but then when we're bringing this work, like, bring forth your personal experience, but also if it doesn't meet somebody else's, that's not bad. That's not wrong. We are going to have these fruitful discussions to really figure out what can help and work for others. So like those experiences, like and rather than be intimidated, I was excited that we had all those different experiences to bring to the table, because we would, talk about a certain app or website, and maybe it doesn't work for my high schoolers, but it works great for this elementary librarian or this person who works in admin or this person, or the university professor who has more access, or even little things like, oh, it's blocked on my school site, was helpful to the conversation because we had so many varied experiences at the table. So really, it's not like nobody was like, well, I have the best experience. This one's the most important. Really, it would just be like, well, this is mine. This is what happened here. My kids wouldn't use this. Or like, oh, actually, my students love this. Like, this is the best thing ever. And obviously, we're putting together a list of best digital tools for teaching and learning for school librarians in all walks of life. So we really brought that to the table and did a good job of it. It was always just so interesting, things you wouldn't think about because of your particular experience. Like, I'm a high school librarian, so sometimes I'd be like, well, this is for babies, but obviously it's supposed to be for babies. So that's great. Who works with babies? Who can prove that this is a great tool for the littles? And it was just really fun.
I think what's really important is that people's value is that they feel valued in the contributions that they bring and the role that they serve when they work on a committee. I'm hoping you can help me out, because I think I've said this before, but I'm going to be really candid, friends. I have tried to work on a committee at our state level, and I made a very important discovery. I think I was working on a committee. It was probably a planning committee for our upcoming conference. So I'm on a committee with other school librarians. You would think this would be a great experience for me. And I made the important discovery that I'm not good at it. I found that working on a committee was really frustrating. I found that I wasn't good at it. I was a terrible committee member. And I felt like I really wasn't holding up my sort of responsibilities. And I got to say, it was one and done for me, like one and done. I was like, I did a committee and I was like, nope, this is definitely not something that's going to work for me. So I have so much respect for you. But, watching you in these last couple of years, have always, I don't know if you've gravitated towards leadership on committees. I don't know if you've just found it that this is something that fills your bucket or something that you really enjoy. But, when people come to you with opportunities like working on committees and leading committees, what is it that you are thinking when you are considering taking this opportunity up?
I think the best committee experiences I've had were because my committee chair has been very organized and put together and gave us clear deadlines and goals. And then I've had some where, I think, with so much of this being volunteer work, I think some people just bite off too much than they can chew and are afraid to say, hey, I can't do this anymore. I'll give a shout out to YALSA. They actually came up with a policy where it was like short-term committee leave if you have something go on, which I appreciated because I think that gave a lot of my committee members, when things have come up, an easier time saying no when that stuff comes up. But definitely, I'll throw out there though, in your defense, Amy, conference planning is probably one of the worst committees to be on. I say worst because there's just so much that goes into it, and there's so much history to conferences, and you jump in. And so I will say, when I did it for my state organization, that was probably the hardest committee I ever led because there was just so much going on, and you're only doing it for the year. You're only doing it for that one conference, and I promise I never do it again. But you know, call me again in a couple years. Maybe I'll forget about it and join it again.
Well, and you mentioned that the history component. I mean, when you're carrying on a committee responsibility that has happened over years, you do feel that burden of expectation that when you are on this committee, you are going to invariably be compared to the job that was done by the committee under somebody else's leadership, the composition of the team. You know, all of this is something it's hard to ignore when you are trying to do your best on a committee.
It is. Well, and then also you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You want to keep things running smoothly. But sometimes you do have to say, you know, I'm going to do it like this, and we're going to get it through this year. And if it's terrible, y'all can go back to the old way. So I will say I've had some freedoms to do that. So when I've said yes to some committee work, I've kind of looked at that aspect, like how much autonomy do I have within leading this committee, or how much do I have to play by the rules in the book and the old way of doing things.
I think that's an important, I give you a lot of credit. I would never have had the kind of courage to suggest that I would try and do something different. I would feel so beholden to what has been done in the past that I would not have that kind of courage.
Well, I think too, just being a member first before you lead it is helpful, because then you can see the ins and outs, and you can be like, well, when it's my turn, I'm going to do it differently. But you keep that to yourself. You're just a good committee member until then.
I think that's an excellent advice. Keep it to yourself.
Just be a good committee member. Don't be that person. Let them get through their job. And then, yeah, if you care so much and you want to change things, then you lead it.
I have to ask, currently, what are your obligations in terms of committee work that you're doing?
So right now I'm halfway through the year for the 2026 Best Fiction for Young Adults blogging team for YALSA, which has been really fun. So we are reading and nominating and compiling books that eventually we will vote and decide on what makes the official Best Fiction list and our top 10. And hopefully that gets revealed, in January, either at the YMAs or around that time. Best Digital Tools just wrapped up. Actually, I am starting to say no to some things, or just trying to wrap some things up. This week is my last executive board meeting for our State Library Association as secretary. I'm going to take those notes one last time. And then I was what was the official title? I'm on the State Policy Training Task Force and Practice Committee for AASL.
Okay. We have so many things to talk about. First of all, the YALSA lists. Friends, as somebody who's relatively new to high school, previously I taught 14 years in elementary. And when I made the leap to high school to teach in a high school library, one of the resources I used when I had some money to spend was the YALSA best lists. Can I ask, as somebody who's been on this committee for a while, how many books are you reading, and are you reading them in full?
Usually we consider several hundred books, and we do have to read them in full in order to really vote and discuss them. I will say the lists usually run between on the one of the committees lists I've been on 50 to maybe 100 books. And then what's nice is we'll have annotated lists with recommended grade levels. So obviously our teen charge is ages 12 to 18, but then you're able to kind of peruse and look and see what books are probably best for your library and meet your collection. So it's not the same as buying books for your library and your collection development policy. It's a little more free, which is fun, but also we are considering any teen book that is published for teens. And then we consider best as a committee after much discussion and nomination. And we also blog about them. So there's the Hub blog where you can see there's also amazing audio, great graphic novels, and quick picks. So in addition to best fiction, so those blog posts, so you can kind of get a little taste of what we're considering before it's official. And also more in-depth blogs to where you can really read and decide whether you think that's good for your library or not.
Well, and friends will definitely be putting a link in the show notes because I'm very grateful whenever somebody puts in the kind of work that it means to be on when you're reviewing literature. And this is, I got to be honest, I get most of my reading done through audiobooks because I'm in the car driving to work. But I suspect that at least for you, a great deal of this is reading through print literature. You're not listening to the audiobook like I am, boosting it up to 1.75.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole different committee. I mean, we can still listen to an audiobook, but then when we're discussing, if someone's like, well, that narrator wasn't really great. And it was like, well, but we're just best fiction, so we're considering the book itself. So sometimes that comes up, but I'll listen to an audiobook every now and then if that's the only way I can get a hold of it.
Excellent. All right. So, and let me ask you, when it comes to the task force, tell me what's the goal of this task force?
So this task force, I'm excited to be on because this is where I'm just a member.
She says just, but understand there are expectations with being just a member. Can you go into some detail?
Yes. So this task force is to kind of come up with a plan for advocacy training for our state chapters. So starting with an in-person training at AASL 2025. So we're still working on the details on exactly when that's happening, but information has already been sent out to the state chapters about inviting at least 2 of their members to be a part of the training if they can come to it at conference. So in person, but then also kind of gauging. We had a survey that went out and figuring out what topics would work for some virtual training. So our work is actually only scheduled through January, and then the next group will kind of carry on that work.
Fantastic. And forgive me, but, when you put yourself out there, you also become ones who are selected to participate in trainings yourself. So you were able to go to it was a training about law in libraries in Chicago last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, so there was an initiative that they've had in the past, ALA has had in the past, and they were able to get funding for a new cohort officially called Law for Librarians. And so had to be tried to get at least 2 people from each state, with one of them being affiliated with school libraries. So, of course, we had a little school library table, and we had a real good fun. But now we've gone back to our states and done trainings on the topics we've learned about, including First Amendment rights in libraries, policy, meeting rooms, all sorts of things. So I've done a virtual one, and then I'm doing some in-person ones with some other peeps from the cohort at ASL 2025.
Yes. Kathy Lester from Michigan.
Yes.
Oh, it's exciting. So what advice would you give to school librarians tuning in, whether they're interested in joining a committee at the state level or the national level?
I would say to at least try and just kind of go for something maybe a little more low key. There's definitely task force and things that aren't full year commitments. There are lots of virtual opportunities. And if you're ever ooh, well, what is this really like? Even if you don't know the people, you could reach out to someone and just ask, have a 10-minute. When I've tried to get school librarians in my state to get involved, sometimes it's just a phone call where I really just lay it out, what is expected of them, how low key it can be, all virtual. So, it works with their schedule, especially if they're the solo librarian and not able to do meetings and things during the day. Just ask around and get that feedback. And then, if it's really, and also just look at what's happening, in your life. I've had school librarians who are ooh, I'm not doing it this year because my kid's graduating and this is their big senior year, and I really want to be there for them no matter what. And that's beautiful and great. And I appreciate when people really understand that how their family comes first and what's going to happen. But also, I always let people know, even if you didn't plan for something to happen, just communicate. Just say, hey, life came at me. I can't do this anymore. It's really frustrating when you get ghosted or you don't know what's happening. But then also, I don't need people to have to tell me their personal business. I do feel bad when I've had committee members who have had like sudden deaths in their family. And then they've called me the next day to be like, hey, I'm not able to do this anymore. And I'm just like, well, I can't believe you took the time to call me because I'm so sorry for what happened. But thank you. Please, whatever we can do for you, let me know. So yeah, I mean, what's important, but at some point, like just, shooting a message like, hey, I can't do this anymore is helpful. So just be communicative, ask people what the commitment is, and at least give it a try. Try at least one, see how it goes.
Well, I will say the wonderful thing about it is it sounds like when you've had a really great experience, your willingness to take on the leadership role is something that you've not only earned, but something you look forward to doing.
It's been one of the most rewarding parts. I've met so many people. It's always even fun, too, when you do a virtual committee and you only see them on Zoom and then you meet them at a conference. And it's just beautiful to like actually really connect with people from all over and do this and then be able to like call back to your fun Zooms or the work you did. Like you've already built that basis for a friendship. And then you can actually like kind of just build on being cool friends and not just committee members.
Exactly. I have had some fun experience, especially at AASL 23 in Tampa, because I met somebody who had listened to the show and they'd heard me talking in the lunch line, and they turned around and they go, Amy Herman. And then they looked down and realized I'm only 5'2". And the first response was, I thought you were taller.
Just because you're a celebrity. That's such a thing that we do with celebrities. We think they're taller, and then we're like, oh, but it's okay.
Yes, I stopped being the tallest person in my house in 2015 when my children were all taller than me. And 5'2", and I'm very short. But it is funny because when you do so much online and you do so much through like a Zoom or a recording like we're doing right now, you really don't, you're just a face on a screen, and then you go to a conference and all of a sudden it's a whole different story. Friends, I'm very excited. Molly, I'm going to be asking you for a couple more links in our show notes. This has been a really great, hopefully people are inspired to say yes to some committee work, because it sounds like a really great opportunity if and when it fits in your personal life. So Molly, I'm going to see you in, St. Louis in October. Is that right?
Heck yes. Counting down the days.
So we will see you at AASL 2025. Let me ask you, if somebody would like to add you to their virtual PLN, could you give us an idea of where people might find you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Molly Dett. That's just my personal one. I'll talk about book stuff and school stuff, but also lots of videos of my dog. And then professionally, I have one for my school library that's on Instagram and Facebook that's just at Norman North Library.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Molly, I can't wait to see you in St. Louis in October for AASL 25. I am so grateful for your help today. I hope you have inspired people tuning in right now to consider working on a committee and maybe even leading one.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, let's all work together.
Friends, be sure to check out the many links in today's show notes. If you use Apple Podcasts, you'll want to follow the link to the podcast website for active links. Apple Podcasts also has an AI-generated transcript of every episode, should you prefer. I am also learning that Spotify does not automatically provide transcripts, which I didn't realize until recently, so switching over to Apple Podcasts may be more useful. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. I hope you take a look at the link to Junior Library Guild in our show notes. Use the code UNITED15 and receive 15 free books with your first shipment. Next week is American Library Association's National Conference, this year held in Philadelphia. I am very excited to be attending, and as I have a July birthday, I have declared that attending ALA National is my birthday present, and my husband is very glad to be off the hook. That being said, if any of you are also going to be in Philadelphia for ALA, I hope our paths cross. Please feel free to email me or message me on Blue Sky or X. I will be collecting voice recordings of school librarians I meet throughout the conference and will post an episode in early July featuring the school librarians I meet in Philly. The topic of our next episode is connecting with your community and my conversation with Angela Myers. I hope you will tune in.